Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, because today we're uncovering a massive historical truth that completely contradicts some pretty deeply held modern assumptions. We often look at the world today and kind of just assume things have always been this way, right? Especially when it comes to the global distribution of wealth and knowledge. But history is actually full of these incredible overlooked realities. So today, we're focusing on the historical reality of the Mali Sultanate under Islamic rule. By looking strictly at the staggering numbers, the surviving texts, and the tangible wealth, and frankly, by focusing on the hard data rather than trying to rely on artistic depictions of historical figures, we're going to see the immense scale of a civilization that really challenges everything we think we know about history.
700,000. Just let that sink in for a second. Now, I want you to guess what this massive, staggering number actually represents. Is it an amount of money, maybe a population count, or a measurement of land? Usually, in the context of the 13th century and beyond, finding a number this astronomically large points to an empire's vast resources or the size of its military. But the reality of what this number counts is far more impressive, and it completely shifts our understanding of global intellectual history. That number represents the estimated 700,000 Timbuktu manuscripts. For centuries, private households in Timbuktu have been quietly preserving what is essentially an absolute ocean of knowledge. We're talking about texts detailing highly advanced disciplines, art, medicine, philosophy, and science, right alongside copies of the Quran dating all the way back to the 13th century. What's truly fascinating here is how this completely reframes our geographical history. These aren't artifacts locked away in some European museum. These are texts deeply rooted in the heart of Africa. They're so historically significant that they're the subject of many active, ongoing research projects by Western universities and the UN today.
Section 2. The Wealth of Mali. From Manuscripts to Mines.
You know, intellectual wealth of that magnitude doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's almost always supported by immense material wealth and a highly stable economy. So, how exactly did this society fund such an incredible dedication to scholarship and the careful preservation of hundreds of thousands of scientific and philosophical texts? Today, Mali is currently recognized as one of the poorest countries in the world. But looking back to the Mali Sultanate under Islamic rule, it was literally one of the richest countries on earth. It creates this intense cognitive dissonance between our modern perception of the region and its actual historical reality. It forces us to ask what exactly made them so incredibly wealthy.
Well, the answer was quite literally right beneath their feet. Their economy was driven by massive gold, copper, and salt mines. And remember, salt at that time was virtually as precious as gold, being absolutely crucial for preserving food and sustaining life in the region. Controlling these specific, highly sought-after resources made the Mali Sultanate an absolute economic powerhouse. They were deeply connected to and heavily influenced global trade routes.
And all that immense resource wealth, it brings us to this absolutely mind-blowing figure. 30 tons, which has a modern equivalent of around 1.3 billion British pounds. This metric is tied to the 14th century ruler of Mali, Mansa Musa, who historians widely consider to be one of the wealthiest people to ever walk the earth. When Mansa Musa performed his Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca, it's reported that he didn't just travel quietly, he distributed this unbelievable amount of gold along the way. Without even needing to picture the man himself, just try to visualize the sheer physical volume of 30 tons of pure gold moving across the desert landscape.
Actually, let's break down exactly what happens when that much wealth moves that fast. It's a real domino effect. Step 1. Mansa Musa gives away 30 tons of gold on his journey. Step 2. This sudden, massive influx drastically floods the global market with wealth. And Step 3. The consequence. It causes a severe 10-year gold recession in the major economic hubs of Cairo, Medina, and Makkah. So the crucial takeaway here is that one man's charity literally crashed the gold economy in 3 of the world's most prominent cities for a full decade. The value of gold plummeted simply because he gave away way too much of it.
Moving on to Section 3. An elite learning hub. The standards of Timbuktu.
Now that we understand the staggering economic foundation of the Sultanate, let's shift our focus back from gold to intellect. Wealth allows for the building of institutions, sure, but the rigor of those institutions is built by brilliant minds. Take the journey of Abd al-Rahman al-Tamimi in the early 1400s. He travels all the way to Timbuktu with the specific aim to study. But upon arriving, he quickly realizes that the local level of scholarship is just far too high for him to even begin. He is literally forced to leave, traveling to Fez in Morocco just to take prerequisite courses so he could eventually return and keep up with the scholars in Mali. This brilliantly illustrates that Timbuktu wasn't just some basic school, it was the absolute pinnacle of global academia.
Which brings us to Section 4, Reframing the Colonial Narrative, looking at the historical record.
Having established the profound wealth and academic rigor of the Mali Sultanate through hard data and actual manuscripts, we now arrive at a fascinating historiographical intersection. How do these documented facts align with the stories told later on? Well, while the widely distributed colonial narrative often claimed the intention of, quote, civilizing the natives, the documented pre-colonial reality shows a highly educated, incredibly wealthy society in Africa living under Islamic rule. The source highlights this stark contrast to show how the historical reality of the Mali Sultanate directly and powerfully challenges later colonial claims. The objective historical record of 700,000 scholarly manuscripts and a 30-ton gold distribution simply tells a very different, evidence-based story than the one that was popularized during the colonial era.
To further contextualize how these global power dynamics shifted and how narratives were rewritten, our source references the influential political scientist Samuel Huntington. Reading his analysis of world history objectively, right from the source, he states, "The West won the world not by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, to which few members of other civilizations converted, but rather by its superiority in applying organized violence." The source utilizes this quote neutrally to explain the mechanics of how shifting power structures ultimately replace the pre-colonial realities we've just been examining.
And Huntington concludes his thought with this really striking observation. Westerners often forget this fact. Non-Westerners never do. It's a profound lens through which the source asks us to view historical memory and the legacy of civilizations like the Mali Sultanate. The disparity in how different cultures remember the exact same historical events deeply shapes our modern world. And honestly, that raises a vital question for all of us. Think about it. If a civilization armed with 700,000 scholarly manuscripts, renowned academic institutions that required prerequisites in other countries, and a ruler possessing such unfathomable wealth that his sheer charity crashed international economies. If all of that can be broadly forgotten or overwritten by a later narrative, what else is missing from our history books? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into the numbers, the texts, and the tangible wealth of the Mali Sultanate has empowered you with a fresh perspective. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.